So there are these two goldfish in a tank, and one looks over to the other and says, "Do you know how to drive this thing?" I know, jokes aren't my specialty, but I'm much better, I think, at economics. In this video, we're going to look at this idea that you might be thinking about essays all wrong. So let's get started. Before we start, I'm mainly talking about essays in the context of the New South Wales Economics HSC, but some of the things I'm going to talk about are relevant for you, whatever subject you're doing at the high school or perhaps even university level. Now, as a teacher, one of the comments I get most often when I'm handing back work, particularly essays, it is, "Where did I lose marks? Where did I lose these marks? Where did I lose marks here? Where did I lose marks?" Now, for me, every time when someone says, "Where did I lose marks?" it shows me that they don't quite understand how we as markers evaluate an essay or a piece of work. In fact, it seems like these people think that, okay, so I start with full marks and then everything I do eats away at that full mark total. But in fact, the perspective you should take is quite the opposite. You don't lose marks in an economics essay. What you do instead is you gain or build marks. So you start with 0. In fact, everyone starts with 0. And then for every relevant bit of information, quote, statistics, link back to the question, engagement with the question, every time you add that information, you move higher than that 0 position and you work your way up the bands towards that full mark position. So if you think about maybe you're building a Lego house, right? So you set the foundations and there you go, you're in that kind of bottom range there. And then as you add to that foundation and you build up higher and higher, you're working your way up through that marking criteria. Maybe you're going into the C range, then the B range, and maybe you're touching the A range. But you have to give markers reasons for you to move up higher. So you have to give them extra information, insights, analysis, all these really important things to help them see why you should continue to move up. So let's have a look at a question and how a marker would examine it. To do that, let's have a look at the 2016 Economics HSC and we'll look at question 26. So worth a big 20 marks. The question reads, explain why an Australian government may not be able to achieve all of its economic objectives, and refer to the economic information. Okay, so keep this in mind or write down the question if you need. Explain why an Australian government may not be able to achieve all of its economic objectives. So it's a pretty large question looking at conflicts between objectives, thinking about macro and potentially in a micro sense as well, looking at the past, looking at the present, looking at theory, all sorts of things. So in terms of doing this question, let's have a look at how a marker would look at your response in terms of allocating the marks that it is worth. Okay, and now here is the marking criteria for that question 26 from the 2016 Economics HSC. So what I want you to think about is that as much as you would like it to be the case, you do not start here. No one starts here. In fact, if you look at where you start when a marker first looks down at your carefully crafted words, that you start right here. And what you need to do is you need to keep providing reason for the marker to put you up into the next section in terms of these marking guidelines. So let's see where you start. So it says, presents a limited response, uses some economic terms and concepts, lists aspects. So we've got limited response, some, lists. What you're entitled to here are 1 to 4 marks. But if you start to move up, so you add a little bit more to your essay house, then you can move into that next band. So if you move from a limited to a generalized response, if you use some and you start to use more economic terms and concepts, And if you identify some aspects rather than listing, list to identify, okay, we can start to move up to that next band in terms of the essay mark. If we can give the marker even more, if we start to develop a coherent response, if we start to use relevant economic terms, concepts, relationships, and theories, if you can demonstrate some understanding, or you can provide some understanding of why the government may not be able to achieve its objectives, okay, then you're starting to move into that higher range. But again, you are providing reasons every time as to why the marker should think, yeah, that's right, that is a better response than that previous band. And then if you look at this B range band here, if you are starting to develop not just a cohesive response, but it's logical, you're not repeating yourself, the story makes sense and it flows. If you start to apply terms, concepts, ideas, and theories, you don't just kind of use them. If you demonstrate a sound knowledge rather than some understanding, and if you start to add some explanations here, then you're going to start to move into this B range here. And the idea here with this sound knowledge here, the understanding, the explanation, that you are able to provide more supporting evidence in terms of your argument. If you are then trying to hit to that top range, that A range response, you're going to need to take it up a step. Again, you're going to need to provide the most fancy, elaborate, innovative renovations to your house to really show the marker that, yep, you've synthesized your own knowledge. Yep, you have integrated the terms, you've got a clear and comprehensive understanding, and you have an informed explanation. You are actually providing even more evidence here. Maybe you are also providing quotes and views from economists, but you have to be building. You're not starting at 20 and losing. You're starting at 0, and you have to provide the justification for the marker that your house is looking really good. Just a quick note that marking criteria that I showed you before, that's specific to that question 26, that it's not going to be the same every time. So if you're hitting all of those things for that particular question, that may not be the key criteria for a different question that you might do. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, leave a comment. Always good to see you here. Thanks a lot.